So as you join, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, and we're going to be in breakout groups later on, so you'll have a chance to have smaller group discussions and meet a couple folks then. But for now, feel free to say hi to each other in the chat. And our plan for the day is to focus on our next policy priority, our fifth one, which is on defining, developing, and training the climate change adaptation and resilience workforce. And we're really excited to have Frank Niepold joining us from NOAA's Climate Program Office, and Rachel is going to also help lead the session. But before we jump into that, we're going to do a couple of policy updates. So I can start with that, and then after the policy updates, we're going to hear quickly from Laura about just some group updates and encouraging everyone to vote to have this group again next year, and then we'll get right into Frank's presentation with Rachel. So with that, if anyone has policy updates that they want to share, feel free to also start dropping those in the chat. And I have a couple that I will share now as well. So as everyone knows, the midterm elections happened, and we now have a Democratic Senate and a Republican House, and the new Congress will begin on January 3rd. It's the 118th Congress. So lots to think about in terms of how adaptation can be at play in the next session of Congress. But for this session of Congress, want to just point out a couple pieces of legislation that have moved that might be of interest. One is the Precip Act, which has now passed the House and the Senate, and that's about directing NOAA to take action regarding precipitation estimates for the U.S. And I can drop into the chat actually the kind of short description of this bill, which should be signed into law since it passed both chambers. Oop, that is not working at all to drop it in the chat. All right, I'll do that after I finish talking. And then we also had a couple relevant pieces of legislation that passed out of committees and have been sent to be voted on in the House. So one of those is the National Coastal Resilience Data and Services Act. Another one is the Tribal Coastal Resiliency Act. And then the third one is the Safeguarding America's Future and Environment Act, or the SAFE Act. And that one is about creating working groups to develop climate adaptation strategies for fish, wildlife, and plants. So those are a couple that came up in the last 4 weeks or so that have actually seen some movement in Congress. I am now going to pass it, if he's here, to Max Neal. Max, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. I want to give you a couple moments for your update on the unmet needs of environmentally threatened Alaskan Native villages assessment and recommendations. So over to you for 4 minutes or so.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Max Neal here, calling in from Anchorage. Over the last couple of years, we've worked on a report that'll go to Congress and others, and there's a few recommendations that are relevant to all of your work, and I'm seeking your guidance and perhaps support. I'm going to share the recommendations and then maybe ask for your help to see if you can support us with a distribution strategy and maybe alignment with some of the work that you know that's happening at the national level. So one recommendation is to have a climate migration pilot program in Alaska for Alaska Native villages, single funding source based on risk, no grant applications, project prioritization system. That's first recommendation. Another is to get rid of a lot of the barriers for equity for small tribal and rural communities. So we have like 20 pages of equity barriers for a whole lot of agencies. And then the final one is to have a whole of government implementation framework specifically for Alaska. At least pilot this first in Alaska. So those are the recommendations, and we have some notes on a draft distribution plan. And I just wanted to come to you all today to see any reactions to this report, anyone interested in engaging us, helping us. NOAA the NOAA administrator is funding a position here to help distribute the report. So we really aren't very well plugged into the nationwide network. So coming to you just for any advice and guidance. So Anna, I don't know, like that's all I have. I can send a draft of the report or the draft distribution plan, but if anyone wants to engage and support or has ideas, I'm just here to share that.
Awesome. Thanks, Max. Maybe maybe you could drop your email in the chat. And then also if anyone is excited and wants to engage with Max, you could also drop in the chat and kind of coordinate there so that you all can get in touch with each other. And I think we'd also be happy to include draft of the report in kind of our follow-up email if you'd like us to do that, Max, so that people can see that and get in touch with you if they're interested in having further conversations.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Awesome.
Max, you can email me the report and I can get it out in the follow-up email. And it looks like Angie raised her hand to chat more too.
Okay.
Awesome.
I also, yeah, just really quickly also, I think if there's a lot of energy around this, and it might make sense for us to put it on our blog or do a short letter of support from the network. We can also, that can help us with social media leverage because we can put that out directly from ASAP as well.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
If anybody else has policy updates to share, feel free to be dropping those into the chat. And otherwise, I think I'm next passing it over to Laura.
Thanks, Anna. Excuse me. I wanted to remind folks, if you haven't seen this in your email already, but we are currently in the voting is currently open for the member-led groups for 2023. So voting is required by December 18th. So I'll drop a link here shortly. There were 8 groups proposed for 2023, including our group, the policy practice group. And the voting is set up so it's ranked choice voting. So you actually have to vote for your preference 1 through 8. So please, if you'd love to see this group continue, please make sure you take a few minutes to vote. Oh, thank you for dropping that in, Brianna. And I just want to note that they're actually, the collection of 8 groups that have been proposed all look fabulous. So kudos to the ASAP membership for putting forward some really great ideas for supporting adaptation work across the country. So I think we win either way. There's going to be some great groups. I just really would love to see this group be in those be in that top 3. Regarding the group, so there are spots on the leadership team for the policy practice group. I just joined the leadership group about a year ago. I think it's been about a year, and I will say that I've enjoyed it a lot. So I highly recommend it. I've appreciated the opportunity to get to know my colleagues a little bit more through the leadership group and to also have a voice in helping to shape the future direction of the group. So it is not a time intensive task. It's 1 call a month in the morning Pacific time. So if you have some time in your calendar, you're interested in having an opportunity to work a little bit more at the national stage, then please do feel free to reach out to me or anybody else in the leadership team. Happy to answer any questions. And then the last thing I'll note is that our action plans for priorities 1, 2, and 3 are now finalized. In the agenda, you can find a link to the action plans. The remaining action plans are also, action plan 4 is being developed now. So thanks to all of the authors who helped contribute to those plans, and thanks to all of you who obviously provided the good foundational material for drafting those plans. So please do take a moment to look at those, and you can share those out across your networks. So I think that's all I have at my end.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, so next we are gonna pass it over to Rachel to get us started with our talk about workforce.
Great. All right. Thank you all so much. For anyone I don't know, my name's Rachel Jacobson. I use she, her. I'm acting director of ASAP, and it's great to be with you all. I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, lands of the Anishinaabe and Wyandot peoples. I'm super excited to be talking about policy priority number 5 today, and that is invest in defining, developing, and training the climate change adaptation and climate resilience workforce. And we're going to have a 2-parter for you today and next First Friday, which is January 6th, with our amazing team of folks who recently worked together to put on a similar set of workshops at the National Adaptation Forum. So our team is myself, Anna McGinn, who you just heard from, her colleague Savannah Bertrand, Maria Viteri-Hart, and Frank Niepold, and you'll be hearing more, especially from Frank today and Maria on January 6th. So thanks so much to the team. Just a brief overview of what we are going to cover today. So I'll give kind of a quick overview. It's less like an overview of the workforce and more an overview of the workforce work that we've done up to now. And then we're going to spend the majority of our time with Frank leading us through a small group exercise around the question of workforce bottlenecks. And he'll explain a little bit more what this means. But, we have so much investment that's going into adaptation and resilience work, and we want to explore the question of adaptation and resilience workforce through the question of what work is going to be funded, and do we have the people with the right skills to actually complete that work? So that's what we're going to do with Frank, and then we'll wrap up with a report out from our small groups and talk about next steps for what we'll cover in the second part of this series on January 6th. So hopefully you are all ready and eager to participate in a small group. But first, let me just share exactly what policy priority number 5 is all about. So this is our policy priority around investing in defining, developing, and training the adaptation and resilience workforce. So we know that the workforce is growing really rapidly, and that we have jobs spanning a ton of industries in every sector. And what we want to do is make sure that there is equitable access to adaptation and resilience jobs. We want to make sure that job performance is at a really high level, and that there are consistent adaptation and resilience outcomes stemming from the work that's performed by adaptation and resilience professionals. And we know that governments at all scales are, and especially at the federal level, are going to need to collaborate with industry partners, labor partners, education partners to first and foremost understand the adaptation and resilience workforce, assessing how adaptation and resilience work aligns with existing occupation classifications that are coming out of the federal government, connecting with employers to study workforce shortages and needs, which we'll focus on today, articulating career pathways for adaptation and resilience professionals, which is going to be the focus of our January 6th workshop, and cultivating a shared identity for workers and making sure that there's equitable access, especially to entry-level and career-building opportunities. And then another piece of this is investing in and increasing the consistency of education and training for adaptation and resilience workers. And in order to do that, we have to know what are the skills and competencies that those folks need. We have to develop some increasingly targeted training and apprenticeship programs. And we have to increase the incentives that are available for uptake of existing education programs, and make sure that we're evaluating what are the education outcomes of those programs, and even more importantly, what are the adaptation and resilience outcomes that are stemming from the higher level of practice that's able to be performed once folks have access to those education and trainings. And then finally, we want to make sure that investments in worker education, training, and solutions are really prioritizing people who are most climate impacted to become part of the adaptation and resilience workforce, to support their development as leaders and make sure that these opportunities are equally available irrespective of immigration status, and again, to ensure that access to entry level and career building opportunities in particular. So this is what the policy priority is all about. And this is what, when we talk about adaptation workforce with policymakers, these are the ideas and the needs that we're trying to further. And I want to briefly describe just a little bit of what ASAP's work in this space has looked like up to now. I'm going to share a little bit on that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Anna to share how EESI and Maria have partnered with us to really expand the work that we're able to do in this space. So what we do right now is we match employers and employees to promote equitable access to adaptation and resilience jobs. We do this through our online job board, our weekly jobs newsletter, and by partnering with community organizations and academic institutions to really expand awareness of adaptation jobs and ideally create a pipeline of talent, again, especially of people who are affected by climate impacts to meet their adaptation and resilience goals. And then, of course, we connect with the network to collect and analyze workforce needs and opportunities. And Anna will highlight that a little bit when she talks about the fact sheet that we've worked on with EESI. And then finally, we support employers and employees through our professional guidance resources and our associated trainings to help promote consistent adaptation and resilience outcomes. And I won't go into that really specifically here, but if you want to know more about our professional guidance resources and our education and trainings, you can always contact me, and I can speak for days on that. And yeah, so with that, let me turn it over to Anna to share about some exciting products that we have worked on together in this space.
Yeah, so thanks, Rachel. We basically have been trying to put together resources particularly designed for federal congressional staff to use, but available to the public to kind of start to communicate both what information we do know about the adaptation workforce, as well as highlighting what information we don't know and that we'd like to find out, and that perhaps Congress could have a role in helping us to find out by asking different federal agencies to take on those responsibilities. And so what we've done so far is that EESI puts together a fact sheet about climate jobs every other year. And so in the most recent edition of that, we included adaptation and resilience jobs based off of analysis that Rachel and Maria, one of our longtime PPG members, worked on together. And so that was like a first stab at that, and we'll be doing another set of analyses to include in this year, or I guess 2023's climate jobs fact sheet. So that is one piece we're working on. And then we also put together a kind of more narrative analysis of what is going on in terms of what we know and what we don't know about the adaptation workforce. And so these are a couple examples of graphics and tables that were included in the in that kind of breakdown, and happy to share that resource with folks as well. But that's kind of the basis on which we are now working to develop this further understanding.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anna. And I just want to, before I turn it over to Frank, I just want to briefly highlight that, this work is ongoing for us, and we continue to seek support and feedback on it. So I would love to share with anyone who's interested. This is kind of the list of workforce research questions that we're really interested in exploring. We have a list of resources and activities that we are really hoping to be able to do together and to bring the network into more of that policymaker education, as Anna was talking about. But as we'll talk about today, updated jobs and skills database, career pathways that Maria will share with us, and more. And then we know that obviously we already have a strong team that we're doing this work with, but there are a lot of partners that we want to engage in this work. Landscape partners, folks working both on adaptation and resilience jobs, but also climate jobs more broadly. And there are more and more organizations that are starting to do that climate jobs work that we want to be able to connect with. Workers, of course, adaptation professionals, but even beyond the folks who are represented in our network today, folks who are doing work on the ground on green infrastructure installations, everything from that to, you know, things that are really highly represented in our network, such as planning and consulting work. And then career information systems companies, K-12 and higher education institutions to really start creating that pipeline of talent. And then, of course, employers. And we're really grateful to have so many incredible employers and workers in our network and to be able to bring them together as we keep going with this work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frank, who is going to, Frank, thank you so much for being here amidst your power outage trouble. So Frank is on the phone, so I'm going to advance the slides for you, Frank. And right now we're looking at the 2019 U.S. Coalition of Climate Actors.
Fantastic. Thank you for being flexible, given that we're having major power issues in my neighborhood, and that happened 30 minutes ago. So I think we've got a workaround that'll work. So we'll find out. So the reason, and I'll be brief here in my remarks, we're going to talk for about 5 minutes here, and then we're going to move into a breakout session activity to really dig into the details of what is an adaptation job and how can we find clarity on that. One of the strategies that we're using at NOAA in our engagements with climate action leaders is that they are beginning to see choke points, staff issues, limiting personnel to do the work of adaptation and resilience across the country. This image is from a America's Pledge report from 2019. Why it's important is it documents subnational climate action. And what that shows you is that while it is an uneven map, it is a very significant map of climate action by lots of different types of institutions, cities, states, businesses, faith organizations, universities, and so on. But what that tells us is that this activity is moving from a planning phase into an implementation phase. But clearly, the demand for these kinds of skills and efforts is going to go up significantly. In order to deal with that, if you go to the next slide, Rachel, our mapping of kinds of activities that are needed, resources, efforts, sectors, capabilities to kind of deal with that, it's much more complicated than we often think. It's not just training programs, it's much bigger than that. And so in our analysis, we found that there is a significant body of efforts that could be aligned, but one of the deepest issues is it's not aligned. These efforts are working in isolation of each other and probably not at scale. So that kind of sets up an opportunity, but we still have to clarify, what are we talking about? What exactly are we talking about when we talk about an adaptation and resilience job? So if you go to the next slide, slide 11, Rachel, you can see in cities that are doing deep climate work, like the C40 cities, they've come together and they see a significant amount of jobs. Their analysis for, their work is 50 million, this is international, green jobs. Now notice that they have a focus on green. Those are the easier jobs to quantify. When it comes to resilience and adaptation, it's much more challenging, which is why this community's focus here is incredibly important. So, if that's going to be the case, that creating these jobs, in the sectors at the bottom box there, where it says, creating jobs in construction, transport, energy, healthcare, industries, but it's bigger than that. And so if you go to the next slide, slide 12, when you think about the mitigation side of the equation, you get documents like this. So this is for HVAC, the people who put in heat pumps, which is a core strategy on the mitigation side, but you have very clear articulation of the kinds of the columns, which are the kinds of jobs, and then the levels of jobs and the articulation of each one of those dots. On adaptation and resilience, I don't believe we have this level of articulation. I think that we need that. And so this is just a model that I'm showing you as an example. So that's on the kind of what we need. But then if you go to slide 13, at NOAA, we've been leading a multi-year process to inventory programs that work in the climate capacity building and engagement space. It includes education and training, but also workforce development. And so over the last 2 years, looking at external documents like budgets and websites, recently passed climate bills, department and agency websites, we've identified in slide now 15, Rachel, the results slide. Is that what you're looking at?
Sorry, I'm looking at methods. Oh, here, now we're on results.
Yeah. Yeah, just go to results. It's faster. I'm trying to make sure we get time to actually do work. You can see we've done this 2 years now. You can see the numbers of programs we're talking about across 10 agencies and 6 independent agencies is 546. That is a very significant number. And when you think about that, now if you go to slide 16 with the 22 inventory, you're going to see where the dark blue is. These are direct programs. And you can see commerce, where I am at NOAA. I'm a civil servant at NOAA in the climate program office. You can see a very significant number of programs. And then that medium blue is where there is climate and other things. So it's an indirect. And then the light blue is programs that are working in the space, but they don't have a climate focus. You see a very significant number of agencies and departments and a very significant number of types of programs. So what that tells me is we've got a lot of activity, a lot of money's moving, but do we have the right articulations? You go to the next slide, you're going to see these 3 climate bills that you all probably are tracking: the Infrastructure, IRA, and the CHIPS Act. That's CHIPS spelled out, by the way. They're very creative with their names. The inside of those bills, which are very significant multi-year investment, go to the next slide, you can see for the kinds of things we're looking at, you're looking at billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, investing in climate engagement and capacity building as we define it. So if you go to the next slide, you can see which agencies are receiving which kinds of money. Clearly, energy is a very significant investment, but in transportation, they're getting a lot of the infrastructure bill. Commerce is getting mostly IRA money. EPA is a mix, and so on. But this opens up a real opportunity for us, because these investments, where they intersect with resilience and adaptation, there's going to be a lot of money flowing into these activities. But again, we don't really have a good understanding of what the jobs are. What are we talking about? What specific jobs? And are we short on any one of those key jobs to do all of this work? So that's really the setup for this activity. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a quick activity. We're going to break you into small breakouts, randomly assigned, and you're going to be given a task. And that task is you're going to get a Google document. And inside that Google document, it's going to kind of set up the National Coastal Resilience Fund grants. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at some grants. Then we're going to look at the fact sheets. We have the 22 fact sheets, the 21, the 20 fact sheets. And what I'd like you to do is work together in teams and identify what jobs do you think are needed to do what those grants say. Again, let me say it again. What jobs are needed to do the work of that grant? Now, these are the National Coastal Resilience Fund grants. What we found at NAF was there's some issues. There's some mismatches. And in order to name the jobs, we're going to use the occupation finder from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's a lookup tool. You can look in there and say, I think we need this. What does occupation finder say that's job? And name the jobs that are in the occupation finder below on the sheet. Just choose any one of these little groups. Just name your group, what grant you looked at, any quick descriptor, and then what occupations did you find? And if you found some issues like, oh, you would need this, but it's kind of not here, that's helpful to know. Or it would be kind of part of this and part of that. Name those jobs. What this will do is help us as a group, as a community, really start understanding how do we start describing what jobs we need, and how do we, because that's what Bureau of Labor Statistics does. And then could we work to better define it so that we can work with the systems that actually design and develop those people so that we have a better workflow pathway than we currently have. That's the expectation. Does that work?
Yeah, thanks so
I know
much,
I'm doing
Frank.
this blind.
No, I think we're good. So I've sent in the chat, I've sent the Google Doc where every group can be working. So every group is working in the same doc. And if you'll
Yes.
see, I'm sharing my screen right now, and Frank has already set up the example templates for each group. So just grab one. If there's not an available one, just create a new one. And then there's a sample here that you can look at. And then the National Coastal Resilience Fund links are right here on page 1, as well as the Occupation Finder. And I have sent the Occupation Finder link in the chat as well. So I just want to give folks a chance to either raise their hand or unmute if anyone is feeling particularly lost or feels like they don't have what they need to go into a group of 3 and do the exercise that Frank just described.
And we have until 1:55 to do this. So we have some time to go in here and pull this out. Oh, I mean 1:50, I'm sorry. And
Yeah,
we'll come back
1:50.
in.
Mhm.
Yep, 1:50.
Like a community engagement process of some kind.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Okay, so Frank, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just got to start with one simple word. Wow. You know, as I saw this, I was in a group, and the details and understandings about the workforce and occupations needed to do this work based on what is really robust. But we did definitely see what we saw at NAP, which was the occupations that Bureau of Labor Statistics are tracking, and what we are seeing is based on the work. There's a mismatch, and that's kind of what we've unearthed. Does anybody else want to name what they saw here? We only have a few minutes.
Elaborate?
Yeah. Would you want me to elaborate more?
Yes. So, can you elaborate on your question?
Sure. So meaning that this exercise of looking at a very small amount of information about a federal grant and looking at the jobs that would be required to do that job, that we saw this group could define the occupations needed to do this work based on your collective efforts. But there seemed to be a mismatch between Bureau of Labor Statistics, what they're tracking, and the work that is going on in these activities related to resilience.
Frank, we do have
what everyone else saw?
Oh, I was going to say, we do have a couple hands raised, so I think there are folks ready to jump in on
go
it.
for it.
Yeah, Lynn, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, well, I just kind of thought that this was a comical finding from our group when we were going through and looking for different types of we had made the list, and then we were looking for them for those professions on the BLS website. And I found 2 types of golf course landscape architects, 2 different kinds of golf course landscape architects listed, but I didn't find any stormwater management professions or any coastal ecologists. So I think that to me kind of said it all. We don't have very high resolution or really, I think, any listed priorities that seem to align really well with the resilience and adaptation needs, but we do have a lot of investment in golf courses.
Thank you, Lynn. That is a sad and funny statement. Do we have any other hands?
Sean's got his hand up.
Yeah, so just the observation that it's really easy to add skills to this that seem to be needed, because a lot of them are pretty big tent, planning efforts in whole municipalities or regional areas. And, you just start putting skills down on the paper, and you instantaneously see that if this was actually like fully funded as a grant project, it would be an enormous team. And, you especially if you followed the actual occupational titles that are out there, you'd probably be hiring just a ton of different people when really it would be advantageous to have them all blended. There's a lot of skills missing. I think climate skills in general are missing across the board because all of these were coastal grants. So it's like there's a pretty good understanding of coastal hazards in coastal fields, but there's a lot of climate hazards that still happen in coastal areas that aren't as well understood. And I think that that would be really needed to be injected in all of these. And then, some of the most boring baseline skills that are needed they can't be skipped out on, like the financial and grants management side of it, because if you're receiving money, you need to process the money. And so a lot of it is going to get sucked up into that before you even get down to the doing of the work skills.
We hit 300,000 on our brainstorming before we were even halfway through. Right, I didn't even get near ecologists before the project was over the budget of these traditional kind of market opportunities.
Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
Well, while we were going through everything, we were kind of brainstorming, and I started, looking up in the Finder, just resilience and some of the things we were talking about. I just wasn't finding anything, so I kind of gave up, and we just started listing sort of skills that one would need, it was really thinking about as a professional nowadays. Just thinking about myself as someone who's older and who's been working in this field for years and years and years in hazard mitigation. And, what kinds of, you just need to do a lot of different things. What do you specialize in? How do you for yourself and your own career, and if you need to hire someone, what skills do you need to keep growing and changing and making yourself marketable? And when you're hiring people, what are you looking for? And how, everything's changing so rapidly, and it's scary. I'm in Florida right now with working on Ian recovery, and it's really, really scary. Dealing with this firsthand climate change. Just what we have to deal with and the skills that are really needed. So those kinds of things is kind of what we talked about. The skills.
So Rachel, I think
I think we can take
time?
another minute. Yeah, we can take another minute
Yeah.
here, and I think Bala has his hand up, and then I'll turn it to you to just wrap us up.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to share a thought that came up for me, that when we try to define occupations, maybe the first step, one of the first steps would be to define specializations within the broader occupations that are listed. Lynn was pointing out that you have two kinds of golf course landscape architects. We definitely need a dozen types of hydrologists. So with who would serve specific roles. And we come from different professions ourselves, so maybe we could individually engage with our respective professions to see what kind of specializations could be defined within those professions or occupations that specifically address the needs that are coming up as we listed those. Thanks.
Thank you. Rachel, would you like me to close out so we can move to the final part?
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, so I great deal of gratitude to everyone exploring this approach, innovative approach to looking at whether or not we have some occupational issues. I want to pick up on the last point that was just made, that the people who are doing this work right now actually are incredibly valuable to helping us define and describe the work for the growing number of people who need to join this effort. So, I hope we find a way to define and describe these occupations so we can track and see where the gaps and the bottlenecks are, so we can actually focus our efforts to increasing the workforce needed to do the transformations to make a resilient nation or world. So a great deal of gratitude. I'm glad this worked for me, but hopefully you found some value in it as well. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Frank, and thanks for being so adaptable and joining us via phone. I'm really glad we were able to complete the exercise with you. And so just as we wrap up here, as Lara put in the chat, don't forget to vote for member-led interest groups. And then our next meeting will be January 6th at 1 p.m. And Maria, if you're still here and you want to give a wave, Maria is going to be leading us through a workshop where we will review draft adaptation job profiles and share insights from our own career pathways experience. And this is meant to form the foundation for a more concrete career pathways tool. So really complementary to what Frank just described. And we are working in the background to synthesize all of the information and data that we're getting through your participation here. And so similar to the policy action plans that are coming out from our other workshops, we will certainly be putting out a product as a result of these 2 sessions. So really wonderful to have you all with us today, and hope to see you in January. And thanks, everyone.